All right. Let me just check to see if we are, in fact, on board. Okay, cool. We're live. All right. Yeah. So welcome to the second episode of the Polyfactual interview series, where we're just interviewing traders of, you know, about insights that you have, things like that. And yeah, I'm happy to have you on, Ivan. So when I first got into prediction markets, which was literally like only a few months ago, you were one of the first accounts that popped up, and I remember, yeah, like basically, I'm going to ask you, just like your background and stuff, but I remember because I had a very strong thesis against the uh, so during that whole Ukrainian summit, when Putin was meeting with or when Putin and Trump were meeting and then meeting with Zelensky, I was on the complete opposite side of you. Now I came in like as a novice, obviously, and you won, and I was I think that's the first time I was kind of like impressed by you because I was like, okay, he's pretty accurate. He knows what's going on. I was very convinced that like Trump was going to solve this. But again, like I was just jumping into it. So yeah, so that's kind of how you first came up to my attention. I guess just for starters, I'll just kind of kick it off. Uh, Let me get my. Yeah, do you want to kind of introduce yourself? Talk a little bit about how you got into prediction markets to begin with. Like what kind of got you into this space? How long have you been doing it? Um, I think we can start there if you'd like.
Sure, yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me. As I said before we came on, I watched your first episode. It was cool. I know the guy that was on. So yeah, happy to be here. So yeah, a little bit about my background. So I guess it's kind of relevant here. My educational background is in international relations and macro. So I have this like geopolitics background. Always been interested in like geopolitics, news, so that will then later feed into like why why I got the Russia thing so right, at least so far. How I got into prediction markets, well, I've been betting just in general. Well, I don't know, ever since I was like 12 or something. Started betting on sports, and it was actually almost exclusively sports, really. Tried to make it with sports for a while. That was going well, but then it turned out to really just be luck. So it went kind of like up and then down, gave it all back. And sports is just in general like pretty difficult to beat if you don't have like quantitative models and that kind of stuff. You can't just like eyeball it like with politics. It kind of works. With sports, that doesn't. Generally, with anything that's like numbers based, is very difficult to just like do it like with bro science. With Polymarket, so I knew obviously about what was it called, predicted, but it was only for Americans, and I'm German, so I could never access that. And anyway, like the limits there were kind of low, even back then when I didn't have any kind of money, but still like $800 is like, oh, it's just like for fun, really. I bet the first time I really bet politics, that was actually in 2020, the election. I was on Biden, and we were probably the guys who are watching this and who are like the OGs. They will know the site. I think it was called Bet Moose. There was during the predicted era. There was another site, like a friend of mine. He found another site. It was called Bet Moose, and you could bet with Bitcoin there. And we bet on Biden with Bitcoin. And then because there was this whole thing with Trump not admitting that he lost the election, and then people who were on Trump, they said like, no, he hasn't lost the election yet until this other guy is really in the White House, where we're just no, we haven't lost yet. And that was quite favorable for us because we rode up the entire Bitcoin run from like election day 2020 until January or so. And there was 2 months of up only in Bitcoin. So instead of like a 2x, we got an 8x. And that was the first time I really, first time I really bet actually politics. First time I made money. But that was then kind of it. Got more interested in crypto. Again, made some money and then lost it all again. And then with Polymarket, I really like I found out. I don't know when actually Polymarket really started, but I found it. I think it was like 2023. I had some smaller bets there when there was this mutiny in Russia, and there was something else. Like, but they were really like smaller bets. And then the first time when I really like the first time I kind of not took off, but really like made a little bit more money, it was 2024. Right at the start, it was a sports bet, and from there, like 2024 went pretty well. But then after the election, after Trump got in, it just I just took off. Like my account kind of took off and went vertical. Um, and yeah, most of it was like just like two, three, four really high conviction, but also fairly risky bets. And yeah, that's how we're here.
So yeah, that's interesting too. Like, it's something you said there. Like, I feel like with political stuff, it's just easier to predict for some reason. Like, I know nothing about sports. And it's interesting that you said like you need some sort of mathematical, like kind of algorithmic understanding of it in order to really do well. Whereas politics and geopolitics, you can analyze more in a qualitative way, which I think is kind of the draw for someone like me. I'm not a math guy. I have a development background, like I have a programming background, but I'm certainly not like a physicist or anything like that. That's more my brother. But my draw to politics is like it's like psychological, right? It's like I can psychologically take apart kind of what they're thinking. I'm not as good at it as you are, but that's kind of the thing that stuck out to me when you said that is that it's just, and that's why I think it's such a high volume space. Um, what's your thoughts on kind of you know narratives that you like to trade? Like, is this, would you say that this kind of geopolitical stuff is the preferred narrative for you? Um,
Yeah, I've been really trying to zero in more and more on where I'm good at, where I make money, and where I lose money. And I don't know, I guess you see them like every month. I write like a little trading recap, and now tomorrow I have another one, and that will probably do well because like now I crossed 1 million in PNL. So I guess people will be interested in that. And I've been doing better now with really zeroing in on what I do well. And that's like you said, like that's the politics stuff. That's kind of the stuff that you can't model because you cannot model a ceasefire. You cannot model a negotiation. You cannot really price it. It's really wisdom of the crowd stuff. Unlike a crypto option or unlike the Fed rates, for example, which we can also talk about. But that's actually math based. There, I've been making money, but only because I think the markets are a little bit biased and have some kind of a degen premium there. But yeah, it's this politics stuff that I do well with, and especially the stuff which again is not because there's also math based stuff in politics, right? So elections, you can model them, and they can be quite difficult to beat. And I've really traded only I don't know 3, 4, 5 elections, and right now, for example, I'm following the Dutch election, which is in a month, and I can it's not easy to build a thesis because like I don't have an election model. And even if I had one, I don't know how much it would really help me because I'm trying really to understand, okay, like what's driving like the national mood, who are the like how is the political landscape, why are people voting for this guy and not for that guy, where could voters flow, that kind of stuff, like the personalities of the main politicians there. And that's, for example, that's why I did with Germany. I found it easy. I mean, Germany is also very predictable, but that's where I know the politicians. That's where I know, how the voters, where they could flow, where they won't flow, where some parties are capped, where others, have like a floor or something. But that's difficult in, I don't know, what was it like in Romania, for example, where many whales got wrecked. I didn't really trade that. First of all, because I didn't follow it, but also because that stuff is not easy. Like you can't just, if you're like an outsider looking in, it's more than just polls. It's you, yeah, you can like eyeball it, but a knowledgeable local in an election will always have an edge over a knowledgeable outsider, like over a knowledgeable whale, because they just know like the little intricacies. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and well, Germany especially, like for me, Germany would be incredibly complicated because I feel like it's a very complicated party system. Like there's a lot of political parties in Germany.
The Netherlands are even worse. Trust me, now I'm following the Netherlands, and it is super
Yeah.
messy. And like how they vote, how they count votes is messy, and there are so many parties. And Germany is like fairly predictable, but in the Netherlands, like then one party, like in the last month, one party can surge 10%. Germany, they rarely have that. So yeah, well, but European, just in general, European elections much tougher than the US, in my opinion. It's much more difficult, like
Yeah,
more
with
predictable, but also like much tougher to kind of beat them because they're more predictable. You have like less of this like narrative trading, and like someone does well in a debate. Kamala does well, she spikes 3-4 cents, and then kind of just retraces because the fundamentals aren't there. Like the showman element, you don't have that in Europe, and that makes it more difficult actually to trade.
Do you find that that is an advantage? Like, do you prefer that to the U.S., where the U.S. is simple, but it's not. You're not guaranteed to win, but it's a more simple system, as you said. You clearly trade cross country, which is something that I have not even tried yet, just because the depth of information is so staggering that I would have to research. But what do you prefer? Like, do you find that these more complicated markets give you more of an edge? There's more opportunities, as there might be in like some crypto markets, for instance, with the more complex markets, or do you prefer trading, uh, you know, the U.S. markets?
The best markets are where there's a lot of information, like the really best, like the absolute, for me, the best markets where there's a lot of information, but it's not necessarily that easily accessible. It's not like hidden or closed or anything, but you have to look a little bit for it. For example, like with Russia, all the information that I traded on, obviously then how I put it together, maybe there's my edge, but it was all there. And it's actually, a lot of it was even in English. Like a lot of the information that I took, it wasn't, you didn't have to know Russian for that, because I follow a lot of English speaking analysts for that. So those are the best, in my opinion. That's what makes also the US so. I wouldn't say it's easy to trade. For example, like I don't really mess with like governor elections, although now I took like a small position, but I'm aware of the fact that I don't really know what I'm doing there. So I'm in there, but I'm very low conviction, could be very easily out again. Like in the presidential election, that's probably the best one, because you have because again, you have so much information. You have like all these polls, you see the candidates all the time, you see how they interact with like their own base, with the other candidates, how they act under pressure. You see, you get like a feeling for the national mood. What do the people want? Like what makes them tick? So that's why the presidential election, I wouldn't say it's easy to trade, but it's like why is the most fun to trade, I guess. And for example, for other elections, like with the Netherlands now, which I'm following, well, I would love to have a show like, for example, in the US, you have Two Way, this political show. I watch quite a lot on YouTube. And it was very helpful in the run up to the presidential election. If they had a two-way for the Dutch election, that would be great. Like I would literally just run it through a translator every day and see what the people on there say, because they keep me kind of in the loop of what's the topic of the day in the Netherlands. But I don't have that. So I have to rely on polls. I have to rely on what someone else says. But again, I don't know the candidates. I don't know, like how, is their word for real? Can I trust their promises not to work with this guy or with that guy? And it's like these little things, as an outsider looking in, like you can work that knowledge up, but it takes time, and you don't want to do this for every country. So I follow the Netherlands because it's kind of important, but I don't trade Bolivia because, man, I just can't be bothered with that.
Yeah, as yeah, I've looked at the Bolivia market a lot too, and I think it brings up an interesting question, right? Because you need a lot of information to trade certain markets. There's going to be demand for streamlining this information. I don't know how that's going to look. I don't know what type of app needs to be built to do that. But we're moving to a point where, in order to get, you want exposure to all of these markets. I want exposure to these markets, but the information depth is just too much. So it's like, how do we streamline that? How do we get that into a digestible, and we're moving to this. what I see prediction markets going to, and this kind of leads into my next question for you. But what I see prediction markets going to is tools and news and coverage that's set up around more of a fact-based type stuff. People are trying to make money. So, you had media that was very focused on emotion. Now you might have media that's more focused on fact. Maybe people get more educated. I mean, I kind of said it in jest today on Twitter. I was like, oh, yeah, well, maybe like mention markets will make people more informed voters. But, it could actually happen. I mean, this is, this might actually be the way people get informed about their politics. But, I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that. But I'm curious, like, what tool, because you mentioned that you use translation a lot, which is interesting to me. And I'm assuming that you use translation for your decision on the Russian Ukraine summit with Trump. Um, what kind of tools do you use? Like, do you do that? Do you use translation? And what other tools are you using right now that you find really helpful in this space?
Mm. Yeah, so I guess we can kind of split that into two parts. So, like for the first one, the tools which I use for Russian, I speak Russian, so I didn't use tools, and I guess not just the knowledge of the language, that was not the entire edge, but
Let me turn the lights on here. Sorry about that.
yeah.
That might happen a few times during this.
No
Sorry
worries.
for interrupting.
So it just, when you know the language, it makes it easier to look for the information. Obviously, I speak fluent Russian, but obviously for me it's just quicker to read and digest information in English. But I know where to look, and I can more easily tell, is this good info or bad info, which, especially in a country like Russia, which is also very psyops driven, is kind of important. Or take, like, for example, the span, like Latin America. If you want information there, I mean, Spanish is kind of an accessible language, but to find the right information, it's not so easy, right? You have to look for newspapers, which are good, which are bad, what kind of bias do they have, are there any analysts, are there journalists, who are the good journalists, who are just KOLs basically. And then when you know the language well, it's easier to tell that. When you don't know it, I mean, there's a translate button, but it just takes time. It's kind of cumbersome. So in terms of tools, for example, again, what I use now for the Dutch election, and I have now a small position, but I might never, go big. Maybe I just don't see any real value. LLMs, really. So I try to find good analysts for the election, like good pollsters. There's only really 2 or 3 polling institutes apparently in the Netherlands. There's like one pollster that I follow. Trying to find some YouTube shows where I can, again, where they're just political shows, when they talk about stuff, so I can find out, what's an important topic there. Ideally, I would also want to know, just anecdotal evidence. So what are people thinking about? Because it's one thing to read the number in the poll, but then, when you hear a couple of opinions, why is that? When someone says, like, okay, immigration for me is an important topic, how headstrong are they on that? Are they like those damn brown people, need to deport them all? Or are they like, yeah, it's kind of like, actually I really just want, like a higher wage, and the immigrants, they depress wages, and they're so actually migration is not really the topic for the person. So there's something that you can get from anecdotal evidence. So yeah, LLMs are very helpful with that, but you need to know how to use them. And still, judging what information is good from bad information, that's actually where really you can, I wouldn't say develop an edge, but that's important. And
Yeah.
then the other part, in terms of where we're going with that, yeah, I was thinking about that quite a bit, especially like the last few days and weeks. The thing is, when you look, for example, now at what kind of markets have really deep liquidity, and it's not really that many. There's the interest rate market. There's now the shutdown market. And after that is already, yeah, like the ceasefire markets are okay, especially when they're in the news. But when they kind of slip out of the news a little bit, like Ukraine, there's some liquidity, but it's kind of stale. So it's mostly really what has an impact on traditional markets. That's my working thesis for now. So like a shutdown, it will probably impact the market, not in a big way, but at least a little bit. Um, and the same goes for like a ceasefire. Again, Ukraine ceasefire doesn't impact the market that much, but a little bit. Hamas, the same. Interest rates, that impacts the market quite a lot. So there's like a lot of the market puts a big price on finding out that information accurately. So I guess it depends, or if if the demand is there in the next few years to find out, okay, is it really like do how much are we willing, or how much is the market willing to pay to find out who will win the election in the Netherlands or in France recently, where they had like this confidence vote. Market was dead. I wanted to trade it, but the market was completely dead. There's like $5,000 traded. I mean, it's pointless. France is a big country actually. So because who wins in Bolivia at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter for Latin America, much less for the US. So like,
It's interesting too that all of those markets are markets that have like serious, I think you might have mentioned this, but have an application in terms of hedging, right? So like those markets have that dual function where it's like, it's not just like a cool market that you can trade, but it's a market that has hedging potential. It has, people like, especially with the Fed interest rate, like it's huge, it's massive. Why is it so massive? There's probably a lot of people trying to hedge themselves using those prediction markets. Same thing. I mean, the most fascinating markets to me right now. And I wanted to ask you this too. Like, do you trade mention markets? Because I think mention, like, out of all the markets, these are the most interesting to me, just because they're completely new, and they have like really weird applications. I think if you take them beyond just trading political speeches, like, you know, of course you don't have the liquidity for it, but I was wondering if you ever got into to mention markets.
yeah, what you said, I said the same thing like a couple of months ago. I think it was still, no, actually a couple of months. It's over a year ago, but time passes so fast during election season. When it was like Trump mentioned markets, they were obviously a big thing, and they were fun to trade because it was always the same thing. So it made it kind of predictable until like every once in a while, every 1 out of 10 rallies, he rocked you. He came too
Yeah.
late, or he cut it short, and there was always a danger there. But then later, yeah, it was this thing where like you watch something to find out whether they mention your stuff, and then you automatically listen to it. So I mean, out of all the ways to procrastinate, that's one of the less bad ones. I traded them, or I do trade them occasionally. I found, for me personally, what works is when I know the framework of the mention market. So with the Trump rallies, there was always, you always knew there's a rally, he's going to rant there, or yap for like 60 to 90 minutes. Again, sometimes there was something depended on where the rally was. So if it was like in a closed space or something, and then he came too late, there was like the occasions where it could get short, and then it get kind of wrecked there. Um, so the ones with a predictable framework, I found them profitable. So I made a lot of money on the inauguration speech because I knew, it's you know how long it's going to be, whom he talks to. You kind of, I could, like eyeball what he's going to talk about. Like he's not going to me, it was crystal clear. He's not going to mention crypto. He's not going to talk about his meme coin. I mean, it's crazy. Same like with his State of the Union address. But sometimes you can also get wrecked with those. For example, I got wrecked with his press conference in Alaska, which he didn't do. There was something which was supposed to be predictable, but he didn't do it. And I had all yes, and he came out and said like 3 sentences and then just fucked off. And I was fuming because he did the same. He did this press conference. He did it yesterday with Israel, and there actually they didn't announce it. It was kind of spontaneous. They just sat in there for a long time, and then they announced a press conference. That's why there was no liquidity. That's why I didn't really get to trade it. Otherwise, to me, it's very predictable. Trump comes out to a press conference, he's going to talk and talk and talk. It's like all yes, no matter what they put on there, it's probably mostly going to be yes. If you don't really know, what it is, where he talks, if he talks at like the crypto summit, something, then is that for me personally, I it didn't work. So, but yeah, there are people I saw. There are people who can beat them and who follow them very religiously, and that's just my strategy. That's what I found. What works for me doesn't mean that everyone has to trade this way.
Yeah, it's so funny because we were trading the Trump. I forget which mention market we were trading. It was a couple days ago, and yeah, you could basically throw a dart and you would have won, right? You would have hit something that said yes. I think there were like three no's on there,
It's
like
probably
three things that
maybe
didn't
Erdogan
resolve to yes.
when he was in the White House. Like usually when someone comes and he gives like this Q&A session, that's often a yes. Depends on what's on there. But that's
Yeah,
often yes. Yeah.
I forget what it was. I think it was his UN speech. There was a lot of yes
Oh,
based.
that one. Yeah. I had that one exactly. Yeah. That one. Actually, I didn't have mentions, but I think I length or something. It was not a lot of money, but yeah, that one. That's what I meant. That's predictable. He's going to come on there. He's not going to fuck off after 20 minutes. Come on, like it's Trump. He's going to talk and talk and talk and talk. So yeah, it's going to go all yes.
Yeah, that's the markets that you have to watch out for. To your point, and you said this is the recent market with South Park that came on Polymarket. One yes, basically one resolved to yes, and I think it was Polymarket. I think it was literally like the name Polymarket.
Yeah.
Everything else was a no. There was no backlog data for this type of market. It's completely new. So I think you're right. Like those are the markets you got to watch out for. Is the markets with no backlogged history or very little backlogged history, especially with mentioned markets, right? If it's something completely new, probably going to be a lot of no's just based off that one experience. But if it's something like Trump, highly predictable, like you know what he's going to say, there's a lot of information about that. So I think that yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, and you were talking to something like this. So I was reading. So right before this, I was reading an interesting observation that you had, which I think you talked about in regards to the Charlie Kirk assassination, where basically it was like, I'm wondering if you can elaborate, but basically, without explaining it, it has to do with like the way you trade headlines.
Mm.
And I thought it was a really interesting observation. I was wondering if you wanted to kind of, elaborate on it because I think it gets into the minutia of like how you actually trade this stuff and the subtle things you got to watch out for, just like the mentioned markets.
Yeah. Yeah. So this like my working thesis so far. There's just two, not just, but there's two strategies to poly market trading. There's like short vol and long vol, and you have the some people call them pump and dumpers, the scalpers, like someone like Carr. He's long vol. He actually he's not really long vol because long vol would be you buy low and try to sell high. So long vol would be, for example, betting now on like the Fed doesn't cut rates next time, although they kind of promised they would do. And then you wait for some data to get like a narrative going that maybe the Fed won't cut, and then the market pumps, and then either you sell or you hold on to it. It depends on your strategy. So like these scalpers, they either they buy beforehand or they buy when the headline hits. Then you have to be fast. That's something that I don't do because like I don't have edge in there. But this is like long volatility basically. So when a headline hits, market pumps, and then either you sell or you hold on to. Like again, it depends on your strategy. I don't do it, so for me, it's kind of difficult to know where I want to sell there. I'm more short vol, so I like fade the narrative. So when Trump says, this is, for example, what's now happening with Hamas, I'm trying to do it there. I don't like Middle East markets actually, so I'm just following profit there. I hope he's right. He's been right so far, so he better be right tomorrow again. Trump, promises. He didn't promise it this time, but he comes up with a peace plan, and BB's on board, and they're saying like this time we get it, and the market pumps. And now, we're hoping that Hamas will again say no, and or maybe they like throw a wrench in there, and then the entire thing retraces. Like with Ukraine, that worked or has been working very well because they're again they're I know the parties there, I know like they're just deadly enemies at this point. They will not stop. With the Middle East, it's kind of dangerous there because there also you have like sometimes insiders. So, for
Yeah.
example, where I get wrecked with this short vol strategy was with the Israel strike on Iran. Unfortunately, I wasn't the only one who got wrecked there. but it was very unexpected when they struck Iran. Like it was I think it was a Friday, or actually a Thursday, I think, and like the expiry was on a Friday. Everyone thought like they will probably do it, but not while the market is open. They will do it on the weekend. So we all got a no, and then they did it overnight, and all the whales, everyone got wrecked with like the same idea. So it doesn't work every single time, but there I find it easier because I know the target. I know, for example, for me, the target with like Jerome Powell not getting fired is 100. Like he's like, I don't think Trump is going to fire him, at least not this year. Um, so like I just, and there I kind of know how to trade. If it goes lower, yeah, I have some mental stops. I will not martingale it until like very zero, but I'm willing to add lower. So I find it easier to trade in this way. And in general, this just feeds into like an entire idea of favorites are like people like to bet more on underdogs than on favorites. So they like to see, like the potential big payout and bet on that. And then you need these people who sell them this insurance to and try to capitalize on that. And on prediction markets, it works, but it's not foolproof. Like you have to know to pick your spots.
Yeah, yeah, and the insider market, and that's so funny that you mentioned that but the insider market in the Middle East markets are is really crazy. We were following one guy on Twitter. I think his name was like, what is his name, like Moses or something. He has like a picture of Moses as his
Mhm.
PFP. He was tracking that whole thing, which I thought was really interesting. Like you could see pre-activity in these markets well before the events were happening.
Mm.
That definitely indicated, or at least plausibly indicated, some sort of insider activity, which is a whole nother topic of where these prediction markets are going. Um, but yeah, I think one of the questions I have for you too is like, so with like with the example of Jerome Powell not getting fired, it's high probability, right? You can make money off it if you have a lot of money already. How many in your kind of trading experience? How often do you take asymmetric bets? What's the biggest kind of asymmetric bet you've taken? Are they, and what kind of conditions have you found often lead to that? It's kind of a weird question, but I'm just curious because, for me, I'm always looking for that asymmetric bet, but I'm a novice. I just got into this space. So I'm learning that that's not typically the best way to go, which makes sense. I mean,
Mm. I think there's a big, in my opinion, just in general, not only with regards to prediction markets, there's a big misunderstanding or misconception what actually means asymmetric. What people should look out for, or like when people talk about like risk reward asymmetric, they tend to mean, or they almost always mean high odds. But what you actually want to look for is plus EV, like positive expected value. So, for example, if I offered you a bet today that I will, you can, there's like a 99 cents on the sun will rise tomorrow. I'll pay you 100 cents tomorrow. And like you pay me 99 now, I pay you 100 back tomorrow if the sun rises. You say, like, yeah, well, obviously, yeah. I mean, I get you 1 cent, but like you would ask me, how much can I bet? Because it's a sure thing, right? So
mm,
it's more than a 99% chance. So you have this positive EV. It's not necessarily what you probably mean with asymmetric, which is, more than um, so like more you want more than double your money with an asymmetric bet, but you want to look for this like positive expected value. And I think this is where people kind of get it wrong. I'm not saying like that you get it wrong, but it's probably like at least partially what you mean. Because when I started like on Polymarket, people can look it up on Polymarket Analytics. I went from zero to the P&L that I have now, and I could lose it again as well. Like it's not guaranteed that I will always stay ahead, and it's always just going to go up. And basically, most of my winnings they were like Ukraine markets. I made a lot of profit because I just faded all the time the ceasefire. Once I also got a little bit lucky when Polymarket clarified in my way, which I expected they would, but it wasn't a sure thing because like their rules are like sometimes dubious. And when they announced this like 24-hour ceasefire, like it was kind of I was a bit on the edge there. But that, for example, for me, it was totally asymmetric. Because I was like, there's absolutely no way Putin stops this war. Like he is hell bent on this. In Ukraine, they will not budge. Like they would go it alone without the US. So for me, it was never 60 cents. For me, it was always this is like at least 90 cents. So I just went in and in and in more and more. Also with Jerome Powell, like when the headline broke that day, and there was really only like 1, 2, 3 days when you could get in for a reasonable price. It's also not asymmetric in what you probably or you may think. Like I want 30 cents to turn into 100 cents. It's like you buy 70 and then you either hold to expiry, or you say, what, now it's like at 90 plus, let me just take profit and I will try to reinvest it somewhere else, because now the money is kind of locked up, it's stale. You can't even really cash out now, especially if you have a big bag, then it's kind of locked up. So you're a little bit trapped in that. And I have a lot of these bets where I'm trapped in them with like crypto reserves and that kind of stuff. They're totally asymmetric. Like in my opinion, US won't have an XRP crypto reserve. But you can also make it like with these low odds bets. So Domer, I know he's good with that, and he's obviously he has a lot more experience than I do, and he's made a lot of those low odds bets, in a profitable way. For example, I think also like with Kamala. So yeah, you just have to know where to pick your spots, and you have to know your thesis, and you have to know if you want to get out and when, and what are kind of like your like when do you want to get out? Well, when is your narrative validated or invalidated? That's really the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think fading is a very good strategy in that sense, where it's and someone compared it really made a really good comparison to playing theta on the stock market, where you're just like, okay, that like nothing ever, it's the whole like nothing ever happens thing,
I think
and you
lights
can
gone
play
again.
that. Yeah, leg went out. Let me.
Just so you know.
Yeah, I'm in like a weird place right now. So like the light just shuts off, no
Yeah.
idea why, but gets you up, gets you moving. So okay, so I have two kind of more questions for you. I know we're kind of coming up on time for our 40 minutes here, but I got two more questions. First question is, where do you think the prediction market space, the industry, is kind of heading in the next, you know, let's say like over the next couple of years? Where do you think it's heading? What do you think the most interesting things that are going to pop up in this space? What will those look like? And then after that, we can talk markets, because I'm curious to hear your, what markets you're playing right now.
Yeah. Um, I think they are. We're all Gucci at least until 2028, and see who wins the election. If
Yeah,
JD wins, then we're at least more Gucci for another 4 years. Maybe they cancel elections altogether, and then the
yeah,
prediction markets are staying for good. So I guess like for the next couple of years, as long as Trump is in, not only in terms of regulation but also in terms of markets, because if like had he not won, like imagine on all the volatility we would have missed out on. Like I mean, like half the markets wouldn't even exist without him. Like he was really like for all markets, I think it was a godsend, because like he just brings in this volatility and something always happens and it's always like a show every day. You can look on his calendar, who's he going to talk to, what's he going to do. Um, with any democratic politician, you wouldn't have that. And I hope, just in general, prediction markets, I hope Polymarket gets a little bit more professional. I like that they're like fast moving and stuff, and informal, but you can take it a little bit too far. Like the rules need to be cleaned up. They're doing a little bit better now on the clarifications. They're coming more often, I feel, which I think is good. They need to be better written in advance. Like the entire UX is very amateurish, and it's kind of annoying and also buggy to trade on. And it's like, I mean, if you want to run this like as a professional business, which I think I don't know if they do, but at least they want to, and I guess also the traders want to. And maybe we want to build, a business on top of that, like as an analyst or as a, whatever KOL, or let alone like a hedge fund. I mean, like like the fucking like the website needs to be professional. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. So I guess, or I hope they clean that up. In terms of markets, what already works will work even better. elections. I mean, there are elections which have good volume. So yeah, like in Poland, Romania, those are countries which don't really move the needle in terms of like financial markets, but the elections were quite liquid. Also like South America, these elections, which are really only there for poly markets, but they're fairly liquid, so that's cool. You have some others, like ceasefires, they work well. I hope we get, or maybe I hope we won't get more, but like more China related stuff, in terms of politics, because China will probably become a bigger topic, like rivalry with the US as well. Also, like business markets, I don't really follow that much, but I saw like they have like earnings now. These, will companies beat earnings or not? And those seem to be quite liquid as well. I don't do them because I don't have an edge there. There's no point for me. So in general, just yeah, more markets, more volume, more professionalism, and then hopefully, the regulators will see like, okay, like there are some gambles, like degens gambling there, but it's, they provide some sort of value to society, so it's definitely better than crypto meme coins. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree with you. Like, I think the big draw for me for prediction markets is that, look, I love meme coins, right? I've launched meme coins. I mean, done the whole pump.fun thing, obviously, and I love that space. But I prediction markets actually do provide, like, it's funny. It's because they're covering like real world stuff. There's value there, and they kind of like bring value to the news cycle. They bring value to hedging. Like, it's exciting to see that. So I think that, like, in terms of uh, this space, it's one of the first kind of crypto products with some underlying utility to it, which is exciting. um, but yeah, we'll see where things go. I mean, I think, like, there's so many professional trading terminals being built right now. I was watching one the other day, like Trade Fox, I think, which is coming out of Alliance DAO, is one that I was looking at. We're thinking about building a professional kind of trading terminal to make things easier, just to make the UX better. Um, I think that that's where the value is going to come. It's going to come from the ecos. It's going to come from apps being built on top of
Mm.
Polymarket, right? That are, and other exchanges. And I think Prophet was saying something very interesting on our last call. He was saying that he thinks that this whole app boom isn't going to happen until later in the year, like 2026, like late 2026 or something like that. I think. So we're going to go through a first wave, and then we're going to go through a bit of like maybe like a short bearish period, and then we'll have all the infrastructure set up and all of the grants and the builder program set up, where we have like a massive takeoff in these ecosystem apps that are being built on top of prediction markets.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I think we'll see what happens. I right now I have it pegged to 2026. I think political on season. As soon as we get there, these things are going to take off because they touch all the right spaces.
Yeah,
But
I
it,
mean, we'll see. Like just like one small thing to add, we'll see, because everyone, not everyone, like many people expect a crypto bear market next year. CZ is warning us that there's going to be a bear market. I mean, he runs the market, so he's got to know, right? Maybe it won't, even maybe it won't be a bear market like it used to be, but maybe just all markets go down. We don't know, or
yeah,
maybe they don't. But if they do, it's going to be interesting to see, what happens to liquidity on Polymarket. Because if liquidity can stay at least like kind of the same level, and then you have midterms at the end of the year, so there will definitely be interest. And then you also have the World Cup. Like they will probably make. I hope they professionalize their shit a little bit in advance, so you can trade like sports there properly. So there will definitely be something happening now. We'll see. Like if it kind of outperforms the other bearish stuff, if the other stuff is bearish.
yeah, and it's so interesting. A while back ago, I saw a chart. I thought we were going into a topper cycle right now. I still don't know. Like, this market is very hard to figure out. Yeah, it's a tough one to figure out. I mean, essentially, we've been in like a 2-year bull cycle, basically. I mean, it's just gone constantly up for the past 2 years, more or less. So I think it's interesting. We'll see what happens. I mean, going into that, what do you think about this whole? So are you still playing the Fed? I guess is my question to you. You have the tariffs on one side. Um, so far, we haven't seen anything in regards to inflation. We've seen like a small trickle up. Um, I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts going into October? Um, what do you kind of expect? Are you playing this market?
Yeah, well, I had I had like a speculative no rate cut bet, but I sold it today because it probably shut down the government, and I don't really want to deal with delayed data. When does it come out? They'll probably reopen soon. Maybe they won't. You don't really know. Plus, the Fed speakers that were out so far this week, they didn't really sound. I didn't expect them to sound hawkish, but they didn't even like really mention inflation. They were kind of like, yeah, inflation probably. It was more or less like in the mid to longer term inflation, but right now they're a little bit more focused on the labor market. And since basically Paul said last time, it's not only this cut. He said last time there was the gist of it. My opinion was like, well, we know 25 doesn't do anything now, but it's not only the 25 now. So in kind of like it will be in the 25 next time, and most probably the time after that as well. And that's what they also penciled in. So it wasn't really in what I've seen so far, and then like in light of this shutdown, um, I wasn't didn't really want to hold this no rate cut bet, but it could, like I said, depends on how the data comes out, and that's why I don't have an edge in guessing where the data will fall. So my edge, like how I made the money in these markets, is and I wrote it in my Fed piece. Like Nick Timiraos comes out and he tells you what they're going to do. And basically, Jerome Powell already tells you, and then Nick Timiraos tells you one more time, and then if you want to bet against them, I mean, you can try, but so far it's worked every time. So I'll keep doing that until either it doesn't work anymore, or more probably until Powell leaves, and then we'll see what happens with the next guy, because I don't think it's going to be as transparent with the next guy, or they will not. We just don't know who is going to be, and whether they will signal like they do now, like we will do this. We're not surprised the market, because if Trump is so volatile, then maybe the Fed chair will also bring a little bit more volatility. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's a tough market, and you can't. It's hard. It gets harder and harder to trust that data too. In terms of like, you have your own theories about where things are heading. Like you can't even really analyze it from like a macro psychological point of view because you don't know what people are doing behind the scenes. I feel like it's very hard to, as you said, um, guess the data, right? So you can't play it like that at all. At least I found in the last couple times I've been playing it. I guess my last question to you is what markets are you interested in now? What markets are you looking at? Um, uh, Curious to know if you're still kind of playing a geopolitical front or if you're looking at more of a kind of economic front. But I'm interested to know what has you excited right now in terms of
Yeah.
markets.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well, because I want to write my recap probably tomorrow. What I'm watching, like I mentioned it a couple of times now, like Dutch election end of October. Um, so far, I have like a fairly small speculative position. I have some rough ideas, but we'll see. So far, it's kind of difficult to pick value there, and I don't feel like I know enough yet. And from what I've seen, apparently, like the last month before an election in the Netherlands can be quite volatile. So maybe something comes up. That's one. Then now I have to watch the Middle East because I got into that. I don't like to get into it, but again, like I kind of follow Profit on that, and we'll see what happens. I hope he's right. If he doesn't, then I'm going to come after him in Thailand. Um, what else? I'm always watching Ukraine, even if I won't take a position now on the ceasefire, like on the next one, because I don't expect anything until the end of the year. But I do expect some kind of movement over, I'd say, like the next 6 to 12 months. So either escalation or de-escalation. Um, I don't think it's going to stay that stale for like the next year. But I'm always watching that. Like, this is something where I read like the news every day, and I do have some like derivative position there, but I'm not revealing my thesis. Unlike usually for this one, I won't. But I bet Trump to meet Putin next month, and at the end of next month, I'll reveal why either why I won, or how I won, or why I took a winner, or why I thought it would be a winner and it wasn't. Other than that, yeah, Fed's also watching all the time, but for now probably won't bet. There's Argentina elections, not sure yet if I want to mess with like Latin America. Maybe I'll probably read up a little bit on it and see. Um, and that's kind of it, I guess. What else is there? I think the covers, like I just, I look up what are the most liquid markets, what are the where can you bet the most money? Not because I need to bet like a lot of money every time, but it's kind of, I don't really want to bet like $100. I mean, I can do that on the mention market or so, but it just doesn't make sense, right? Because for every market you have to kind of research, to put in time and money, and if you want to flip something, it has to be sort of worth your time and effort. So when you have like a little bit bigger bankroll, then you also look at what are bigger markets, and I don't market make like Domer, for example, does. So I try to pick my spots. I try to see what interests me, and then I try to follow that and develop a fundamental thesis, and then hopefully it pays off. And sometimes it doesn't, and we'll see. Usually something comes up. Like last month, also, I think that every month in my head, like, what are we going to bet? And then just something happens, and yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need to be a certain type. I mean, I think that you need to have a real, in equity markets. And tell me if you agree. But in equity markets, you need to have objectivity. But it's easier to have objectivity in these types of markets. It's very hard to have objectivity. I mean, that's how you make money. You're going to make money off people who don't have objectivity. So, like, it's an interesting skill set because you basically just have to follow the research in a very um, non-traditional, non-affirming way, basically. You have to have that mindset where you can be like, look, like I don't really have any opinions here. I'm just looking for what's going to win.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Because for example, I think, and maybe that's my strength, or has been at least until, or like thus far. I'm not saying it's going to continue forever. Like I don't know. But I saw shame on me. But like as many other whales, I wasn't the only back then. I wasn't a whale. But as most of the veterans, I was also on Kamala to win. I didn't necessarily want her to win. I didn't really like. I'm not a big fan of Trump either. I don't like him or dislike him. I think he's funny, but I think he's also like pretty crazy.
He's good for
He's
markets.
just
He's
this
good
guy's
for.
just. But he's objectively
Yeah.
extremely funny. So, and he's good for markets, exactly. So I kind of disregarded really like the evidence that was there. Like obviously when you're pro Trump, you're like he could never lose. Like it was obvious. But there was also a case against him. Like we thought like, yeah, he has a ceiling, and maybe people they know he's crazy, and maybe they won't vote for him, but they did. And then as soon as the news came in, like the first results on election night, I saw like, yeah, this is going totally wrong. Like I'm just on the wrong boat here, and just switched. Got again a little bit lucky there. But yeah, you have to be able to, or be prepared to just switch your thesis like this. If Hamas tomorrow comes out and says, um, is really open to the ceasefire, not just like, yeah, we're open, but not really. But if there's, between the lines you can read like they're open, um, yeah, then I'll switch. Even with Ukraine, like one time I sold the ceasefire when I thought like the Russians are actually like now they're kind of starting to sound bullish. The Russians sounded bullish, not the Americans. So I was like, Then I sold a little bit too quickly. Got back into it again, but yeah, you have to be able to drop your thesis even if you like it.
Oh, cool, man. Well, it was good having you on. I mean, it was good connecting. As I sit to profit, like one of these days, I'm waiting for a monitor the situation moment. Then what I want to do is I want to get like a panel going because I have 10 seats here, and I'd like to just get a panel of like just traders just monitoring the situation because I think that it's those moments where prediction market liquidity probably spikes up to an insane degree. Yeah, so I'm just I'm glad that you came on and talked about what you're doing. And yeah, I think on the Ukraine stuff again, that is the area that I first saw you cover, which kind of attracted me to your insights. Do you have a sub? So you have a Substack. Is it subscription or do you have anything that you want to kind of promote while you're here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you like, there's my Substack. It's on my so on Polymarket. I mean, we're all add-ons on Polymarket more or less. I don't shill my stuff on Polymarket, but I don't hide it either. Just on X, I've been always doxxed, and I don't really care.
Man,
Um, so yeah, if people want to follow my Substack, just go on. I guess like your shout out my profile on Twitter, and then they can just find the Substack there. I write not as much as I would like to, or not as much as I should, but I will write more now. I already write more now than a couple months ago, but I really want to. I really need to start writing like once a week. And usually, so far, I've only been doing thesis. I'll probably expand a little bit, and we'll see. So next one is almost certainly going to be something like a recap of, not like a not a victory lap on the 1 mil, because don't want to do that. I'm not like the type to brag, but maybe something like some lessons to take away, for others who just start and think like, oh, this is so much money, made so much money, but really I started 2 years ago, and I got a lot of lucky breaks. You just need a lot of lucky breaks. um, so something like that, and we'll see. So if people want to follow it and subscribe, and that one will probably come out quite soon, so in the next few days or so.
cool, cool, man. Well, let's do this again. Let's get on another time. And yeah, yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Sure, yeah. We'll talk when, I don't know, maybe maybe when New York elects Zoran,
That's
and
gonna be
then,
it, man.
or maybe they don't, and then we have to talk about why
That's
we
the
all
moment.
lost
That's
because we're all.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be a good one for a panel discussion. There's going to be a couple of elections there, and it's also like after. That's actually one. It's not next month, but it's like beginning of November. It's also one I'm watching. So after that one, if you want to get a panel
I
going,
think we should do
should
that. Well,
we
it's
do it?
not only Zoran too, right? It's like a bunch of like there's a bunch. So,
Yeah, yeah. There's like governor elections as well, and something in California redistricting. I'm not following all of that. I'm following like the New York one because I think Zoran is a lot. Um, but yeah, there's some smaller elections in the U.S. So yeah, can do
cool,
it after that.
cool, man. Well, I'll see you later.
All right. Cheers. Was a good one. Bye.
Oh, let me figure it out. Okay.
Lily.